This is TWiT.
I was in Chicago last week for the Moto Z3 and 5G mod announcement.
What did you think?
I have a lot of mixed feelings. I don't know if have you heard of this podcast called Mobile Tech Podcast?
Yes,
Did you listen
I've heard of
to
that.
the last episode?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of ranted with David Kogan, the unlocker, about how conflicted I am about this phone and how this whole 5G thing is a marketing ploy. But it's not a bad thing. Okay, so let me walk you through. The thing about the phone is that in the front, it looks exactly like the Z3 Play that was just launched about a month ago, which, by the way, I reviewed on geekspin.com, if you go there. And in the back, of course, I've got a really nice little Moto Mod here, which is just a cover. But in the back, it looks exactly like last year's Z2 Force because it's exactly the same camera modules as last year's Z2 Force. And that is all kind of interesting until we got into the event before they gave us the specs and somebody ran CPU-Z and we found out that it has a Snapdragon 835.
Oh.
So at that point, we were like, wait, we're expecting a flagship and you're giving us a Snapdragon 835. And we quickly put together that the front was the same display as the Z3 Play, which is not a Quad HD display, but a 1080p AMOLED, which all the previous flagship Zs had a Quad HD AMOLED in the front. So interesting. And then we quickly figured out that the camera modules in the rear camera was identical to the Z3. There we go. For Z2 Force last year.
Motorola is
so puzzling.
Economies of scale, it sounds like.
Yes, but then it kind of all fell together when they finally said, oh, it's $480.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, okay. So it's not a flagship. It's kind of a pseudo flagship. But then the more puzzling started happening. We're like, wait, the Z3 Play is $500. And it's a lesser phone with a Snapdragon 636 with a lesser camera because unlike this, which has a monochrome and a color 12 megapixel, high pixel size, f/1.8 or 1.7, I think, camera system, the Z3 Play only has the color lens, and then for the bokeh stuff has like a really cheap 5 megapixel. They don't even call it a lens; they call it a depth sensor. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's purely for portrait. Right. Whereas you can do black and white with this camera. It has a native black and white mode. So we're like, wait, it's more, the lesser phone is more expensive. Now, it comes with a mod in the box, the lesser phone. So perhaps maybe $50 for the mod. But it just doesn't make sense because the Z Play series has always been kind of like the mid-range phone, and then the Z series has always been the flagship. So we were very utterly confused. And then the other more confusing thing is 480 will almost buy you OnePlus 6. So why bother?
Because the OnePlus 6 won't have 5G connectivity early next year.
There's more than that because mods and because you can't use them OnePlus 6 on Verizon. This is a Verizon exclusive.
So that's a big reason.
The thing about this phone is that it's Verizon exclusive. You cannot buy on any other networks. You can't buy it unlocked. Whereas the Z3 Play, you can buy it unlocked. It's available on Sprint, US Cellular, I think. Anyway, it's just very puzzling. If you look at the phone in its in a vacuum, it's like, why bother? Because this phone in 6 months is going to have a processor that's a year and a half old at this point. And as you can see, it's the same usual software you see on a Moto. There's nothing too new and exciting here. Like, it's just the same. The display is really lovely. It's AMOLED 1080p, 6 inches. But that's it. Moto Mods, of course, you get the connector down here, right? But I think what redeemed itself a little bit was when they say, but we have a mod, and it's the 5G mod, and it has a 5G radio in it. And I was like, oh, okay. That's more interesting now. But here's the puzzling thing. The 5G mod supposedly only works with this phone. So it might change other Moto-supported Z phones.
That's different from their strategy, which is our Moto Mods are interchangeable.
But they didn't confirm or deny that. They wouldn't commit. They basically said this is the only 5G upgradable phone.
Got it.
But it's
really
also Verizon
the
special.
So
I have a feeling that all Moto Zs that work on Verizon and were certified by Verizon Verizon in the future might be upgradable to this Moto Z, this 5G mod. Now the 5G mod is the same thickness as the phone, which is about 6 millimeters. So it's a pretty hefty thing. It has a 2,000 milliamp hour battery in the 5G mod, in addition to the 3,000 in there.
Because it requires a lot of power.
Yeah. And this phone has 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage. Yeah, there's my unboxing video. And so, you know, it's basically, I'm calling it the Moto Z2 because last year we got a Z2 Force, and really this is what the Z2 would have been. The only thing that's like 2018 here is the 18.9 display, and that's 2017 really when you think about it, because now we're all about notches, right? So now the 5G mod is very interesting because we did a bit of digging. All I want to say we is the tech journalists at the event, and it turns out there is a SIM inside the 5G mod. It's not an eSIM that's soldered on and can be provisioned remotely. It is a physical SIM that cannot be removed by the user. So this mod is definitely going to be a Verizon specific thing. The other thing is, it doesn't technically on paper, officially, we're not aware of it supporting sub 6 gigahertz 5G. It only supports millimeter wave 5G. And millimeter wave is on Verizon's 28 gigahertz. It's line of sight. If you have leaves in a tree in the way of your signal, or even humidity, you lose signal. Okay, we're talking you're only going to get that 5 gigabit maximum sweet spot when you're outside in an urban area with pico cells everywhere.
I guess it's better than nothing.
Right. So they have an X50 modem in the 5G mod. If you go to my Twitter, there's a bunch of photos of the 5G mod. So if you look at the 5G mod, it's X50 modem from Qualcomm, which is the 5G modem, which supports millimeter and sub 6. And then it has an X24 modem, which is an LTE 2 megabits per second modem. So the fastest LTE advanced modem you can buy. And when you plop that on the back of the phone, it supersedes all the modems in the phone. So it like stops using its internal antennas. It just goes through that mod. You see how it has a little fin or a little stub sticking out? Yeah. That's because millimeter wave, the array, the front-facing one needs to stick out above the display somehow.
No way.
So
it
sticks up. Yeah, because it's line of sight. Where are you going to put the
Holy
antenna?
Cow. So then are we going to get used to this as like a design flare?
Well,
for
so actually, I talked about that on my podcast today with Rose Behar, which will be published later this week. Rose of Mobile Syrup, formerly of Mobile Syrup. So the thing is, there's 4 millimeter wave antennas. If you bring back that photos, you see these kind of weird dents or circles on the edges there, and up there, and then there's one where my thumb is, roughly, and then there's the fin, the one on the front. If you look at the other pictures, you'll see there's another circle up there on the front. So these are where the millimeter wave arrays, they're not just antennas, they're antenna arrays, because they are beamforming antennas that Qualcomm designed. And at any given point in time, one of these 4 antennas will be visible to the cell tower. That's the idea.
Oh,
right?
Man.
So that's how it works. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about the really marketing grabbing rights of being the first.
Yeah, that's all.
Because what we're talking about is really Qualcomm, Moto, and Verizon getting together and saying, now we can say we have the first upgradable phone, the first 5G radio, and the first 5G service in the US early 2019.
Go back and remember who did the first 4G LTE phone too. Verizon.
Right.
That was right.
And it was the Thunderbolt, but it lasted 2 hours on 4G, remember? so that's why they put a battery in there, a 2,000 milliamp hour battery in the mod, so that when it's in 5G, it doesn't completely kill your phone.
Yeah.
And they said it's more efficient. 5G by design is more efficient than 4G anyway, so it balances out. But what I'm trying to say to you is, it's going to be at least until 2020, 2021, until we start seeing more than Verizon with 5G, and also sub 6 gigahertz 5G on Verizon, which is the stuff that penetrates walls unless you actually use the phone properly. And phones that are fully integrated. Because, okay, have you looked at our phones recently? They have less and less bezels. Where do you put that front-facing antenna, guys, for millimeter wave when you have no more bezel? How do you make a phone that's 6 millimeter thin when you have to put that many antennas in the thing?
Well, especially when you consider putting that Moto Mod on there, it makes it more than twice as thick.
Exactly.
And big.
So what I'm saying is that we're not going to accept having 5G on our phones if our phones become like ugly ducklings, right?
No.
So I think it's going to take way more than 2019. I think it's going to be 2021, 2020 before we start seeing phones that integrate all this nicely. Maybe somebody can make an antenna that can be under the display slightly.
But it still has to be line of sight.
Oh, it has to be line of sight for millimeter wave. Yeah.
Okay, so once we get beyond millimeter wave, though,
it's different.
Then this is a transitionary period that is going to be painful for anyone that buys into it.
You still need MIMO, like you still need multiple antennas because, you know, at 6 gigahertz, you're just sub 6 or 5 gigahertz. You know how 5 gigahertz doesn't penetrate as well with Wi-Fi, right? That's 2.4. So that's the same problem. You know, ultimately, the higher you go in the spectrum, yes, the faster the data can come to you. And of course, you know, the other thing you have to realize is that line of sight can be interrupted a few times and you can still get gigabit performance, right? Because think about this, like if you go if you're downloading a file like the Game of Thrones episode or whatever, and you cover it like this, continuously cover it, you're still getting enough non-coverage that there's like gigabits of data coming at you in the moments where you're blank, right?
Okay.
So your upload speed is still going to be super high, even though it's constantly interrupted. In the same way as Bluetooth is constantly frequency hopping around Wi-Fi and still works, right?
So even though line of sight is a very significant limitation, it doesn't take much time. Like even in small bits of line of sight, lots of stuff can happen.
Exactly.
Lots of data can be transferred.
Theoretically, in just like a fraction of a second, you can get an entire 20 megapixel image.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, well, what did they say? 30 Spotify songs downloaded in like 10 seconds or something like that.
Yeah. It's very fast.
Yeah.
So the point is, I want you to understand that all of this is really bragging rights and marketing at this point.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that the technical achievement isn't high. I'm not panning Moto and I'm not panning Verizon and I'm not panning Qualcomm for working together and making this happen. Somebody's got to start somewhere. But here's my thing. Before we see integrated phones that are really pleasant, like what we're used to today, before we could get sub 6 and millimeter available on all three of the big networks, right? Because Sprint by then will have been assimilated by somebody, right? Inevitably. So T-Mo, AT&T, and Verizon. Before we see all this, we're going to need to do a lot more work to integrate this technology. And when we get it, it'll be awesome. And of course, they're going to charge us more for it. And that's the other thing we don't know. We don't know how much that 5G mod is going to cost. And I have a feeling that because it's going to be pretty much locked into Verizon, not only because the SIM isn't removable, but because the bands, we have the problem of bands. Everybody's going to use different bands. Can you imagine how many bands you need to accommodate to have a universal thing? So this is going to be purely a Verizon product. And I think you probably are not even going to buy it. You're going to buy 5G service and they're going to give you the mod. And it's rolled into the price. And the price is crazy. It's going to be expensive. And you get first bragging rights for having 5G when it comes out. And the only phone you can use it on,
the HTC Thunderbolt.
only phone you can use it on is a Snapdragon 835, 1.5 year old phone by then.
Have to imagine by the time that Moto Mod's coming out, that means that the network is available. That has to mean that there's other phone options that you don't know, but I would imagine that there would be something right around.
And then the other question we all asked ourselves was, Moto Mods, they only agreed to support them for 2 years with the 2-year mark. I mean, could this be the last Moto Mod? If they will they make a flagship Moto phone that costs $800 that works with that Moto Mod that comes out around the same time to make it worth our while? We don't know, because I honestly wouldn't want to use a Snapdragon 835 in February of 2019. Would you?
Kind of sounding.
I mean,
like
no offense, it's a good chip, but by that point we'll start having Snapdragon 855 devices announced.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't know.
But this is mid-range. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a different scale than.
I just think that this event brought up more questions than answers. Every time we tried to get Moto, Verizon, or Qualcomm to answer something, they would kind of, like not really answer.
It's like they wanted everybody to know all about 5G, but there were certain things they really didn't want you to know.
And then we would be like, oh, look at each other. Oh my God, I've got more questions. If you go to my YouTube channel where you found my unboxing video, you don't have to play it now, but there is a video of me interviewing Jeff Snow of Motorola. He's basically the head of the Moto Z division and the mod stuff. And and I asked him some tough questions, and it's an interview, and the video is kind of janky because I couldn't see the screen on my camera because it was bright, it was in sunlight. And so just listen to it, because otherwise you'll probably get motion sickness from the stabilization. And it's kind of like Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
But listen to
it
because I asked him some tough questions and he did try to answer them. And, it'll give you a real insight on how confusing this event was, because we all went in there expecting a flagship and a 5G mod. We knew the 5G mod was going to happen. We knew it wasn't going to be live today, but we figured the phone at least would be something that could be evergreen enough to last into next year. And this is a nice phone. Don't get me wrong. In the absolute, for $480, Snapdragon 835, it's a nice phone. But the camera, no OIS, like there's a whole bunch of issues here.
We know how you feel about cameras that don't have optical image stabilization. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Steam pouring out of your ears. What do you think, Phil? 5G, long way to go?
It's a really nice advertisement for Verizon and Motorola. But yeah, we all know why that phone was made.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. It's not very, very difficult to figure it out. I felt, at least with the HTC Thunderbolt at the time, like it was a stinker in some ways, but I was proud to have it early on.
I was super excited to get a review.
It was a good phone for like a month.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, very early on, I was so proud to have the HTC
data
Thunderbolt.
Speeds were pretty impressive with that phone, and that at the time we didn't have anything that could touch it.
No, exactly. That's why you got that. And then you dealt with the battery.